It's been a few days now since Whole Lotta Red came out and I dropped my initial reaction to it. At this point, I've listened to the album over 20 times, so I feel pretty confident in my opinions on it. And to me, this is just such a special album that I have so many things to say about, so I wanted to make a fully fleshed out review, really giving a detailed analysis of how I see this album. If it wasn't already extremely obvious, I'll fully admit that I am a huge Playboi Carti fan, and going into this record, it was probably the single most hyped I had been for an album since To Pimp a Butterfly. And eerily enough, my experience with this album as a whole is very reminiscent of what it felt like to first be experiencing To Pimp a Butterfly back in the day for me. Both are totally experimental and one-of-a-kind records within their fields, and have me utterly mesmerized in the way they push hip-hop boundaries. They both deal with an artist who is super disaffected with their industry, and who are very isolated in their current lives with all their relationships crumbling around them. Also, I thought that coming off of Good Kid Mad City, there was no way Kendrick could ever make a better album. Like, how are you supposed to get any better than that? Then he dropped To Pimp a Butterfly, and then I was like, holy fuck, this is even better. And with Whole Lotta Red, when I put this thing on, I really had to go, holy shit, he may have topped Die Lit here. And going into it, I really didn't see that happening, but this may just edge out Die Lit for me. I'm not gonna say that quite yet, because I know it's only been a few days. I have to let it sit. We'll see with time, but I'll just say this thing definitely has the potential to be my favorite Carti project so far. The artwork and promo for this album was very intriguing to me because it was displaying this vampire slasher horror tinged imagery alongside this very punk rock star imagery as well. And I was wondering if that stuff would actually play into the sound and themes of the album, but I kind of suspected it would just more so be a marketing thing, wouldn't really have anything to do with the music, but I think I was extremely wrong on that front. Not only does it influence the music on this album, but the lyrics as well, and I have to say, lyrically, this album kind of blew my mind a little bit, because this is genuinely, from front to back, a consistent concept album that uses the slasher and rock star themes to make a really revealing project about Carti's mental health, a lot of the paranoia he's experiencing, how isolated he currently feels. He's really showing us his darkest side with this project. Musically, he's making on this album what I would call experimental punk trap, and not punk in the sense that he's rapping over punk instrumentals, or punk in the sense that he's bringing more punk or metal type vocals like you'd find from someone like Zilla Cami, but instead it is punk in the sense that it derives its sound by breaking and bending all the rules that you could find in trap music and creating its own style from it, and in the sense that it prioritizes raw energy and working with harsher, more abrasive sounds, and doesn't follow the traditional technical aspects of the parent genre, which to some leads it to sound just kind of messy and poorly made. But just like punk over time has come to be appreciated as its own distinct sound that also takes a certain level of talent to perform, this here is also music that is very meticulously crafted and has many of its own artistic merits, even if to some appreciators of the founding genre it just sounds like complete drivel. To me, music like this is actually way more punk than just someone rapping over punk music or using punk vocals on a hip-hop instrumental, because that's not really creating a punk movement within the hip-hop genre. That's taking influences from the genre of punk and just pairing them with hip-hop in a way that's already using established sounds and styles. But what Carti brings on here is he breaks a lot of the rules of trap and hip-hop in a way that creates a punkish movement within the hip-hop genre, and has a totally unique sound and isn't just a mishmash of elements from genres that came before it. This album has kind of a fragmented feel to it, which might be a bit jarring to some people at first, but along with the short track lengths, that also actually feels very punk to me and makes for a rapidly shifting and adrenaline pumping trip. Rockstar Made is an absolute atomic bomb of an intro and exemplifies a lot of the strongest qualities about the album. The synths on here are incredibly textured and build such a vivid, hellish world for Carti to mosh through. I find it interesting because I used to be one of the people who really didn't like trap music at all, but I feel like one of the genres of music that opened me up to trap music more would be electronic music, and one of the main reasons for that is getting into electronic music. I really got to understand more about the sonic palette used on songs and about the texture of instrumentals, and now I feel like that allows me to see that the synth work on albums like this, or Future's DS2, or Young Nudi's Slimeball, or many others are a lot more descriptive and immersive than some of the more basic synth work you'd find on maybe your average P&B rock album. Carti's performance on this track shows us immediately that he's going to be experimenting wildly with his vocals all across this album. It makes me think of how if you took someone like Iggy Pop or Sid Vicious and compared them to more traditional singers, sure, they don't sound good in that sense, but what they bring to a song is also an unmistakable form of harnessing vocal energy to create a very particular sonic experience. To me, it's the same with what Carti is doing on here. If you measure his performances by someone like, Eminem or Nas, or even someone like Young Thug, really, then sure, you'll probably think that what Carti is doing on this album is horrible, but in my opinion, if you go into this album looking for Carti to rap like Nas, or like I said, even Young Thug, then that's the same as going into a Bad Brains album looking for singing like Adele. Carti just harnesses so many different energies through his voice on that track. He switches from a more deep, warbly delivery to a more high-pitched one to this dry, strained one in about 5.2 seconds. And as he transforms his delivery across the track, he subtly changes his flows too, which is something that I haven't really seen much from Carti in the past, actually changing his flow within a verse. The repetition of the phrase "never too much" on the chorus feels like a perfect example of Carti knowing just how much context to give us on a lyrical level, because while it may just feel like some nonsense he's repeating to make a chorus, in the context of the song and the album, it feels clearly like a mantra for the rockstar lifestyle. It's basically the whole philosophy behind that lifestyle. You can never have too much. You can never have too much fun, never have too much drugs, never have too much partying, never have too much women. You can never have too much money, and so on and so on. Basically, it is Carti giving us just enough on a lyrical level to paint a coherent and comprehensive picture with the album overall, but also doing it in the most minimalist and abstract way possible. And honestly, this is another thing that feels a lot more rock or punk inspired than hip-hop to me, because you'll find stuff like this in Joy Division's music, or Dead Kennedy's music, or lots of other classic rock and punk artists' music, because they understood that sometimes less is more. And I think that's something that a lot of hip-hop artists and fans really struggle with. It seems like to a lot of people, if a rap song isn't as descriptive and comprehensive as something like Immortal Technique's Dance with the Devil, then it's not really rap and it's just lazy on a lyrical front, when in reality, you can convey a lot of emotion and a lot of inner demons and thoughts, and you can make a really vivid, expressive character portrait of yourself without saying too much. You can just give us the bare minimum, but if it's written in a smart and clever way, you can convey just as much with so little. And I think that really is a skill. I think that is a skill to whittle down more complex ideas that you're expressing to just a phrase. As long as you give us the context to figure out why a phrase like "never too much" means a lot more in the context of this album, then you don't need to go on a full tangent explaining why that phrase is relevant to the rockstar lifestyle. The listener should just be able to kind of pick up on that themselves. Go to the Moon opens with a very aquatic, nighttime sounding instrumental that Kanye's smoother voice fits very well on. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, the beat jarringly switches to a haunting string line and a demonically glowing synth underscoring it. These two beats alternate between each other numerous times throughout the track's short runtime, feeling very reminiscent of the more jarring and harsh editing style of classic slasher films such as Nosferatu that inspired this album. I love the more sinister sounding melodies Kanye brings at the end of his verse to match the more devilish part of the instrumental. And in Carti's verse, I really enjoy how strained and withered his voice sounds while he's talking about how he's seen a lot and been through some shit in his lifetime. Stop Breathing breaks the door down with its volcanic synths and pummeling drum programming. There's also a distant siren-like synth and some faded, heavily auto-tuned vocal riffing from Carti melded deeply into the instrumental, which overall conjures up images of a violent dystopian world thanks to its rich textures. Carti's ad-libs bombard this song like firecrackers, and I especially love that bit before he starts his verse when he goes I can't replicate it, but the fucking insane ad-libs he does there, they just sound so evil, and they literally sound like a vampire brandishing his fangs. And then when you actually get to his performance on this song, to me, it feels like the single most batshit and passionate that he has ever given in his career. He sounds like he has channeled the spirit of a psychotic killer who has totally lost his mind and is at the end of his wits, which makes lyrics like "Ever since my brother died, I've been thinking about homicide" sound chillingly convincing, and they also evoke a lyrical and tonal vibe similar to extreme subgenres in metal and punk. It's lyrics like this that also paint a picture of Carti's current mental state being just as fractured as the album itself. They feel like the inner thoughts of a man who is constantly on edge and paranoid because of the stuff he has been through in his life, and also because all the relationships in his life are currently falling apart, which is something he explores more on other songs on this project. There's also quite a bit of demonic imagery on this song, making it one of the many tracks on here that carries the slasher film element of the album album's concept. We also get many lyrics that strengthen the rockstar image that Carti wants to cement for himself, depicting a brash lifestyle where instant gratification is the only thing that matters to him at any given moment. But with the dark thoughts in his mind, it's almost like he's using this rockstar lifestyle to cover up that darker side of him and to hide it behind this insane lifestyle he's living. It's the most twisted minds in rock music that are often the most fascinating, from John Lennon to Ian Curtis to Kurt Cobain to many, many more rock legends, so lyrically this really feels like a true rockstar's album to me. Also, on more of a side note, this song features an MF Doom reference, which I just thought was really dope to hear in the context of an album like this. Beano features an ultra plunky and bouncy beat that gives off a similar underwater Zelda vibe to the one found on Atmeh. A song like this may give off a simplistic vibe on the surface, but the instrumental programming is very intricate upon further inspection, and the fact that the many layers of melodies and drums do come together to create something that sounds so cohesive and simple on the surface is really just a testament to how well composed the production is. As for Carti's performance, it may not be as blatantly eccentric as it is on a lot of the album, but he still subtly morphs his vocals as the song progresses, and it just feels so meticulously honed and crafted. Not just on this song, but for the album as a whole, it really just feels like every single syllable is pronounced with the exact energy and flair that Carti wants to inject into a particular song. To some people, it may seem like I'm over-crediting Carti here, but honestly, I think to see it any other way is to undercredit him. If you listen to him as a performer on his early tracks and his self-titled mixtape, he does bring different energies from song to song, but his overall delivery on those typically stays consistent throughout an entire track and is just much more flat in general. On Dial It, we saw him playing around a bit more with weirder vocal inflections and more colorfully enunciated lyrics, but once again, he would mostly choose one single style to stick to for an entire song. His vocal progression continued on his infamous leaks from the original version of this album, where he got a lot more weird and unorthodox vocally, but still nowhere near the level that he brings on this project here. On this project, to me, Carti gives his most dynamic and vocally complex performances to date, showing us the end result of years of tinkering and experimenting with his voice. You'll be hard-pressed to find a single word on this album that just sounds like someone traditionally saying it or rapping it. The way Carti wields and warps his voice is ultra abstract and also feels very punk in the context of hip-hop and trap, while also being very musical and artful at the same time. What I'm really trying to get at here is that Carti has basically reinvented how a vocalist can perform on a song in a way that sounds genuinely cool and good to those who see the appeal, and in a way that genuinely takes a lot of creativity and vocal talent to perform. I'm sure some people would point to Young Thug and just claim that Carti is doing the same thing, but to me it's clearly different besides the single commonality of both of them performing really wild vocal acrobatics. The thing is, in Young Thug's case, he still maintained the cadence and flows of your average trap artist and also still wrote using traditional rap structures. That's not a bad thing at all. I love Young Thug and he's also a brilliant pioneer within rap. But with many of the traditions that Young Thug stuck to, Carti breaks in half on this album. With Metamorphosis and many other songs, I can hardly call what Carti's doing flowing. His short bursts of impactful but simple lyrics feel more derived from hard rock than from hip-hop. On songs like Jump Out the House, Go to the Moon, On That Time, New Tank, and No Sleep, Carti breaks down nearly every traditional rap structure there is. And on songs like Rockstar Made, Die for Guy, and Stop Breathing, Carti raps with such a colorful harshness that feels like a blend between the current trap metal and Atlanta rap scenes, but creates a fusion unlike either of them. And when you're a Carti fan, you really get to see just how talented of a vocalist he is when you try to perform along to the songs and you try to like bend your voice in all the weird ways he does. Then you really see just how carefully and complexly every word is said, and you also blow your voice out by the third track and you sound 1/1,000,000th as fluid and good and professional as he does. Anyways, back to discussing the individual songs. Jump Out the House sounds like a mosh pit waiting to happen, with hypnotically repetitive lyrics that sound entertaining as fuck given how amped up and insane Carti's delivery of them is. He also uses like a dozen distinct deliveries within the span of a minute.
Racks on top of my motherfucking bitch. Racks on top of my motherfucking bitch. Blah. I got a back cock. Blah. I
I got a bad car, it's a T, with no mileage, it's a T, it's no dummy. Metamorphosis is one of the most incredible psychedelic rap songs I've ever heard, and it might just be my favorite on the album. I don't know, it's so hard to tell because I think there's so many amazing tracks on this thing, but this is the one that just like blows my mind the most when I hear it. The instrumental is a dense sandstorm of grittily textured synths with a few more polished sounding ones near the back of the mix to pad out the dark, cloudy environment with glowing neon lights. The crowning jewel of the instrumental is Kid Cudi's grand, epic sounding hums, which are baked into the production and fit so naturally amongst the rest of the beat, while providing a wholly unique flair that no synth or instrument could ever capture. Carti's lyrics on this track are mostly a series of simple mantras that he repeats, but like on Rockstar Made, it doesn't feel lazy so much as just the perfect, succinct phrases that powerfully capture the theme of the song. As the title suggests, this song is all about change. It finds Carti proudly telling the world that his evolution on this album was no accident, and he really doesn't give a fuck who rocks with it or who doesn't. When he says they can't understand me, I'm talking hieroglyphics, I feel like Morpheus. It feels like him embracing that not everyone will get what he's doing on this project, but he just takes that as proof that he's ahead of his time. The main refrain of "when you feel like this, can't nobody tell you shit" feels wildly empowering and hard, with Carti literally hissing like a snake whenever he pronounces that S at the end of dis. The abstract nature of his lyrical structure and the way he writes is very effective to me because he makes it specific enough to where it does feel personal to him and it does feel like it adds to the concept of the album, but it's also written in a way where any listener can kind of internalize it as their own anthem for evolution or self-acceptance. Slayer's instrumental feels super cutesy and candy-coated, but it also has a nice lush depth to it that makes the song feel very inviting, and it's one of the many unique galaxies that Carti takes us to on this project. Carti brings out one of his bounciest performances on the album on this track, speeding along with the buoyancy of a tennis ball. On No Sleep, Carti gives us more paranoid slasher imagery with his chilling and violent repetition of "when I go to sleep, I dream about murder." He then talks about how he can't go anywhere without his gun, suggesting that this paranoia from his nightmares is creeping into his real life and he always feels like he has to protect himself from something or someone. Add to that a barrage of gunfire ad-libs and a menacing video game sounding beat, and you get one of the most demented songs on the project. New Tank is one of the hardest songs on the album, with the blood red synths soaring around Carti like geezers. I also really like the vocal layering he uses on the part where he goes, "Let me get you packed outside, it's purple like lean." It just makes it sound really cool to me. The beat on Teen X sounds like being stuck at a haunted carnival during an acid trip, and with Carti taking his signature baby voice to radical new heights on this track, you get one of the trippiest and strangest tracks on the album with this one. Future was a perfect feature for this song because he's one of the only rappers in the game right now with eccentrically pitched and weird enough inflections to match the energy of this song. Vamp Anthem samples the organs from a Bach composition for yet another new sound on the album, one that feeds heavily into the horror and vampire feeling. Control is an amazing new style for Carti, with his wistfully beautiful melodies carrying you through an instrumental that feels like an EDM synth kit being turned into an emo trap rager. The music pairs up really well with the lyrics on here, which depict Carti having feelings so strong for someone that they're causing him to slowly lose control of his own life. The bass on Punk Monk swallows you whole as we hear some of Playboi's most revealing lyrics to date. He details becoming isolated from his own friends, having people in the industry turn against him, and all of this gets him to a place where his trust issues are so bad that he can't really fuck with anyone besides himself. King Vamp has the most blatant vampire imagery on the entire album, with Carti using it as a metaphor for his own night-dwelling lifestyle. The one criticism I do have with this album comes with the inclusion of the song Place. It's a really smooth, cloudy song that I no doubt enjoy, as it just sounds like a good classic Carti track, but that's also kind of the problem for me. It just feels really out of place on here. If it was gonna be on here, I think it at least should have been placed closer to the end by songs like Not Playing and I Love You, I Hate You, which are also a lot more chill and heavenly sounding than most of this album. But having it right in the middle of some of the darkest anthems on the album makes it the one point on this record that I just don't think flows very well. Sky is one of the most depressing songs on the album, but the addictive synth line and sticky chorus make it a highly replayable one. I Could Fall Out the Sky and I Still Won't Feel Nothing is another one of Carti's lines on this album, whose bluntness works perfectly for what it's trying to convey, and his really faded delivery does a really good job of capturing the feeling of being totally detached from reality. This song also depicts the dissolution of Carti's romantic relationship, maybe giving us an idea of why he's in such a numbed and depressive state. But if sky was his relationship burning down, then over is Carti standing on top of its ashes. The main synth on this track has drawn comparisons to the one on Long Time, and I definitely see where that comes from, but I also think that overall they're drastically different songs. Whereas Long Time was one of the most hopeful and euphoric songs in Carti's catalog, sounding like the beginning of a positive new chapter in his life, Over, on the other hand, is a very melancholic and bitter track, with Carti wondering where his relationship went wrong and showing a lot of hurt and anger with how things turned out. I really like the line, "I live my life like a kid with allowance," because it feels like a perfect way to illustrate the rockstar lifestyle. I also like how lines like "Anarchy tatted under my armpit, don't make me start a fucking riot" add to the punk feeling of the album. "I Love You, I Hate You" may have a very heavenly feel musically, but lyrically it follows the darker trend that we've seen so far. Carti's declaration that he's gonna mix his problems with drugs until he's in his deathbed is a line that reveals that he's conscious of the fact that his rockstar lifestyle could easily lead him to an early grave, but he's in a place mentally where it's preferable for him to cover his problems by living like this than to actually address them in a healthy way. I like on here when he refers to drinking lean as sipping that Bloody Mary, because I've never heard that used as a metaphor for lean before, and it also goes really well with the slasher imagery of the album. Die for Guy is a tribute to Carti's brother Reggie, who is seemingly one of the only people in the world he can trust anymore. I absolutely love the Black Flag reference on here, as they're a group that was to rock what Carti is to rap, and given the name drop here, I wouldn't be surprised if they were a big influence on the album. Feel Like Dying is a mournful but appropriate closer to the album, exposing Carti at his most broken and showing that not all journeys have happy endings. The instrumental incorporates many soulful vocal samples, including an especially prominent one from Bon Iver, and like many of the tracks on this album, it sounds nothing like anything Carti has rapped on in the past. To me, this song ties up the album's themes in a way that says, despite Carti's efforts to block out his mental demons with rampant drug use and his rockstar lifestyle, at the end of the day, his demons always catch up to him, and he's found himself caught in a cycle of pleasure and pain that he can't seem to escape from. This album isn't a glorification of the rockstar lifestyle, but rather a hauntingly real portrait of it. It reminds me of that one line from Atrocity Exhibition when Danny says, "I lived through this shit so you don't have to go through it." As much as some people will claim that this album is just vapid nonsense that promotes reckless drug use and bad lifestyle choices, the reality is, like the best art, it isn't meant to be a guide on how to live your life. Whole Lotta Red is an abstract but comprehensive portrayal of Carti's lifestyle and psyche, and whether or not you agree with his style of living is besides the point, because Carti himself puts all the pain and destructiveness on that lifestyle on full display for all to see. So the deeper question becomes, why would someone choose to live such a self-destructive life in the first place? And that's a question which much of this album answers. At the end of the day, this album just exemplifies everything I love about music. It has bold new sounds and ideas, it has unique ways of approaching songwriting and songmaking, it delivers a cohesive front-to-back album experience with consistent imagery and themes throughout, which help craft a clear-cut portrait of the artist at this point in his career. And most importantly, it's an album full of songs that are colorful, memorable, sonically satisfying, and insanely well performed. In my eyes, this album can either go down as a turning point in trap music, a gateway to the next generation of artists that sets the table for a whole new style of hip-hop, or it can go down as a relic of the trap era that stood alone in its field and sounded nothing like anything that came before or after it. Either way, I strongly believe that this will be a landmark album for the trap genre, and to me it contains some of the most creative and interesting sounds coming out of music today. Time may prove me wrong, but I personally believe that it will only further validate those of us who see this album as much more than just repetitive screaming over generic trap beats. So there you have it, that's my breakdown and review of Playboi Carti's Whole Lotta Red. I hope a lot of you guys are getting just as much enjoyment out of this album as I am. Let me know what you're thinking about the album down in the comment section below, and thank you guys as always for watching, and I'll see you next time.